Sports professor Rick Horrow, Beyond the Scoreboard, the show that goes well beyond the trillion-dollar business of sports, deal-making, law, administrative, marketing, all the stuff that's focused now that everybody finally gets to understand because the draft is over after 4 networks of wall-to-wall-to-wall coverage. And we see what happens with the NFL after the draft, but there's more. There's NBA and NHL playoffs. There's baseball heading into effectively month 2. There is football that never sleeps, as we said, and obviously other sports like golf and tennis. If you want to get our whole list of the 15 top items, plus the top 5 philanthropic items and the top 5 tech items, look at Rick Horrow, look at NBCSportsWashington.com. Join us in all the different contexts, Audio Boom, Apple, Google Play, Stitcher, iTunes, everywhere. You get all of these topics anywhere where good content is shown and received. The bottom line is this week is bigger than most for a lot of different reasons. We'll talk about the NFL after the draft, and we'll also talk about some of the issues that football is getting into beyond just the NFL with an interview with the head of the Canadian Football League Players Association. Don't look now, but they're about to strike or there's a work stoppage discussed, and whatever happens there ripples, and the NFL, please take note. But before we get into that, Nashville hosts a record-breaking weekend for the NFL Draft. 600,000 draft goers across the 3-day event. First person evidence, by the way, Dierks Bentley, who closed out the NFL Draft main stage on Saturday with a post-selection concert. Must be the greatest day I've ever had here in Nashville. It's pretty stout for him. Swarming football fans greeted Bentley with a drink-raising elation as he ran onto the towering Lower Broadway draft stage. The NFL Draft in Dallas had a $125 million economic impact, with people spending $74 million. This is going to surpass that by droves. And Sin City bills itself as the entertainment capital of the world. They've got to step up next year, and maybe Cleveland can't and beyond that. Thanks to Nashville. Other cities jumping in line to host the draft, even more sharply evaluating how they can maximize locale entertainment offerings and activation to drop top crowds. By the way, who are the winners? Who are the losers? CAA football, for the 4th year in a row, led all agencies. 5 players taken in the first round. Devin White, Nick Bosa were 2 of the top guys. Lagardère tied CAA with 3 players in the top 10. In all, 18 different agencies represented players picked in the first round, up from 17 last year. The NFL also partnered with Instagram ahead of the draft in a move that allowed fans to directly buy merchandise worn by the top picks. Draftees photographed wearing New Era Draft Day hats were then shared with top official NFL accounts. Instagram shopping tags led users to the NFL shop to purchase. 130 million people interact with Instagram shopping tags each month, while only a fraction of those interactions focus on sports-related merchandise and services. That segment growing very, very fast. Boardroom transactions prevail as well. The Packers' Titletown Tech Fund draws national investors. Microsoft and the Packers each committed $5 million to the venture fund, which will invest in high-growth startups aligned with industries in northeastern Wisconsin. Out-of-state investors joining the Titletown Venture Fund, according to multiple sources: Jerry Jacobs Jr., Delaware North, Jeff Wilpon, partner of Sterling Equities, both big investors, and Wilpon and Jacobs Investments help boost and fund toward the $25 million goal. Both will serve as members of the advisory board. Titletown Tech HQ includes an innovation lab, a business venture studio, and offices for the venture fund, gearing toward fostering growth throughout Wisconsin. Likely more interesting general public, the new Titletown Tech features a new restaurant on its ground floor that'll include local food and beer and 7 sports simulation bays powered by Top Golf Swing Suite. How about that? You get Titletown Tech and you get a golf simulator as well, and not any top golf simulator. How about Top Golf? Well, NFL otherwise doing other stuff. Collective bargaining agreement clauses encourage NFL owners to maintain minority ownership in on-location experiences. Reports indicate that Endeavor had agreed in principle to acquire 80% of on-location experiences owned by Bruin Sports Capital, Carlyle Group, and Redbird Capital for a figure upward of $700 million, the NFL retaining a 20% stake. The NFL generates about 40% of OLE's profits, but the league was never a threat to reacquire the minority stake it sold to the private equity firms for $70 million in 2015. That's because, as a minority shareholder, the league collects its cut of the profits free and clear, and there's no risk involved, and they don't have any expenses. If the NFL took control of OLE once again, it assumes 100% of the corporate tax responsibilities without an allowance of any of the expenses. But remember, under the league's current CBA, the NFL players are entitled to 48.5% of gross, not net revenues, yet another good reason for the league to keep its minority shareholder stance and continue to be involved in this entity entrepreneurially for years to come. Well, the NFL continues to be strong. Their values continue to increase post-draft. The franchise value is up about 8%, 11.5% year over year for the past few years. If you put the same money in the stock market, you make 4.5%. But the issue is what lies ahead. Concussion stuff, labor peace, and not just labor peace specifically at the NFL, but a lot of players concerned about safety and a lot of players concerned about working conditions. It's not to suggest that the NFL and the CFL are the same, but it is interesting after the draft to take a look in a microscope of what might be the labor issues down the road through Brian Ramsay. He's the executive director of the CFL Players Association. He's focused on building active participation by players in their union and developing a strong consensus on all important issues. He's also a licensed accountant who worked for KPMG Canada for 8 years during the off-season of his playing career. He's a valued industry professional who understands all of the labor issues relative to football across the border in North America. It's worth hearing what Brian Ramsay has to say. Rick Horrow, inside the boardroom, beyond the scoreboard. We're here at the 11th annual Prime Sports Conference in Canada. Been to all of them. Everybody's getting older, it seems. I'm getting older than all of that. Kudos to the co-chair, Trevor Whiffen and Brian Burke, our friends. But this is all about the business of football and the business of sports, the similarities, the differences. Brian Ramsay, the executive director of the CFLPA, is not only interested in the business from his perspective, but he also played in the league for 10 years as a guard. How are you?
Very well, Rick. How are you?
Thank you very much for being here. I'm wonderful. So the transition from player to active board member to representative of the players who you played around and the next generation, easy, hard? What lessons have you learned?
You know, I think it's always hard when you ultimately step away from the field. Now, the transition for me was a bit unique, having served as a player rep on the executive, experiencing through the last labor negotiations and then now full-time into this role. But I think, like I said, ultimately every time you step away from the field, it is a hard day.
Hard day, but it gives you some perspective when you first started. When you were playing and before you even began to play in your CFL career, what was your kind of long-term goal? Did you think you were going to lead a labor union, so to speak?
No, in fact, my first year in the CFL, having graduated down in New Mexico in Albuquerque, University of New Mexico, I got right into the accounting field. So I spent the better part of 9 years with KPMG, an accounting firm, while playing and being able to work in the off-season. They were fantastic in allowing me to work. So originally the plans to transition were strictly go into that field and keep my audit clients and go that way. And fortunately, throughout that transition, when this opportunity came up, I was able to accept and haven't looked back and wouldn't again.
As a businessman, we'll get into the details of the business of the CFL in a minute and football generally. But as a business guy, you realize that a broad background was necessary. This is a conference full of aspiring and people who are in the middle of trying to get the most out of their experience in sports business, sports law, sports marketing. What advice do you have for entry-level people as far as succeeding in the profession?
don't be afraid to learn, and I think this conference does a fantastic job of that. If you look at over the 2 days, the variety of topics on the panels, and to sit in here, you're speaking from the state of the leagues to player health and safety and wellness to ticket sales and drafting and having sports agents speak, and you look at that, and if your focus is very narrow as you get in, I think you'd want to sort of have the label of I'm looking to get into sports, and what that means is right away you're not totally sure, but that's okay. I know I want to get into sports.
Back when I was starting my transition in the Wild West and the leather helmet days, we were all talking about learn a little bit about a lot. But sports law or sports business wasn't really an established field either. We've come a long way, haven't we?
Very much so, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and the future of the whole business generally, before we get into your specifics, what do you think is the most dominant issue that will change the business in the future? Is it media rights? Is it devices? What's your sense?
I think there's a mix. I think there's a collaboration of a few. I think ensuring it, and this will transcend sport, is the rehabilitation side and ensuring that we're properly rehabilitating players of any sport. And why I say that translated into the business side is what it does is it trickles down to the grassroots. And if we want younger fans, younger players in any sport coming up that want to play, they're going to have to know that if my goal is to get to this level and to play X sport, whatever sport that is, at the highest level, that we need to know that we're going to be taking care of at that end.
So, Brian, tell me generally about CFL, where you think it is, where it's going today and in the future.
I think as a collective, as a league, we're in a very positive world now. Sports is evolving, as you've mentioned, and we could probably talk for most part of the afternoon here if we wanted to in the evolution in the last 10 or 15 years specifically, whether it's technology or how people are consuming. Our league has been evolving. It's been evolving to appease. It's been evolving on the player safety side. There's potential growth right now with a 10th team to be added in Halifax, which is always a positive when you're talking expansion. And that, when those talks are being had, you automatically assume that the league as a whole is in a positive place.
More jobs, more corporate involvement, more television, versus a risk. It's a relatively small market, et cetera, et cetera. How do you assess that from your perspective?
I think some of it's out of our hands as players, right? And that's okay. But for the reasons that you said, you're potentially going into a market that would embrace having a team. So yes, you're looking at expanded jobs, you're looking at expanded television and things like that. But most importantly, you're expanding the fan base in the country, right? And you're giving them ownership into this great league, and I think that would be a very positive, along with the others that you mentioned there.
I found that when you talk to some of the folks who lead the labor side and the management side of the big leagues, small leagues, whatever, so one of the really important things is to keep appropriate and constructive dialogue with the other side, that they're building their business together and you feel like it's a partnership. Is that the same way it is with the CFL?
I think you have to have that. And there's actually a paragraph in our collective agreement where it states the league office and the commissioner and the association are supposed to meet once a month. And to Commissioner Ambrosie's credit, since joining a year and a half now into his tenure, we have stuck to it, whether it's in person or on the phone, short or long meetings, and I think that it's paramount to instilling so that when you do get to those inevitably tougher conversations, whether it's strictly around bargaining or it's around changes or this or that, that relationship is established to be able to have those tough discussions that are going to come.
For a neophyte audience, relative to the business of the CFL, basic similarities and differences between the structure of the CFL and the structure of the NFL?
It's a smaller scale, and having played, as I mentioned, university ball down in the States, so I've had the experience of the 4 down and 3 down and growing up here in Canada and then playing up here professionally. Once you step on the field, save for the rules and the ones that jump out in the size of the field, football is football. There's, with the 3 downs up here, and now we're kind of drilling down into the specifics of the game itself, is you see those changes and the differences, and it's a bit more of a wide open game. Now, from the business standpoint, and you look at the 32 teams to the 9 teams, possibly 10 teams coming up. So, on the business side, it's a bit different, but that's almost when you look relatively at the populations of both countries as well. So,
and more the business differences. Maybe at scale, the television numbers, the revenue sharing. Is that a similar situation as well? Partnership across the teams and relative to the players as well?
No, right now we currently don't have revenue sharing in our collective agreement, and as you know, we are heading into bargaining, and whether revenue sharing is the right model for our league and uniqueness, that's to be determined when we get into the spring and have those discussions. From a player standpoint, though, what you want to ensure is, as you look for growth and sustainability in the league, you need that partnership with the stakeholders involved, and the stakeholders are the ownership group, the teams, the players, the fans, and in order to have that positive growth, you need that positive when it comes to appropriately and fairly sharing.
As you get into bargaining and as you get into the substantive issues as well, the relationship with the NFL, the management union, not personal relationships necessarily, but business structures and models. Do you all kind of share best practices information? Do you view the NFL as a cousin, as an uncle, as something entirely different?
No, I think that's exactly right. I think that we've got a very strong and positive relationship with the NFLPA and have conversations quite often with them, as we do with the NHLPA and the PHPA and the PLP, and I can go through all the other associations. When you look at, there's a certain uniqueness to each league, and specifically ours, as we're concentrated solely in one country. When you look at a lot of cross-border, a lot of the other leagues are cross-border. But yeah, you have to look at best practice and say, would this be the right fit or for our agreement, and if it's not, why, and can it be altered to sort of fit into the mold of what we're looking at. But I think from a player's standpoint, it's the due diligence from our side is to have those relationships, but to have that information as we go in to find ultimately what's going to be the best fit for us and our players.
New breaking comments, but I'm sure you've been dealing with it for a while. What's your position on the opportunities to help each other in Mexico and the U.S.? I know you got some Mexico-Canada relationships that might be independent of but synergistic with the NFL.
Well, you know what? That is something new that the league has, sort of a road that they've very recently gone down, and there's been very high-level discussions. And at this point, from a player's standpoint, we wouldn't have any comment on that because there isn't information to comment, and that's not saying that we're not trying to. It's just I don't think that anyone's at a point where that information is there. When you look at growth of the league, now again, to what's in the player's control and what's not in the player's control, but I think a positive if we're creating more jobs as an expansion to Halifax or pieces like that, but ultimately I think everyone, and specifically from a player standpoint, want additional revenues to be able to share.
I know this is primarily a business show, but it's my show, so I get to ask whatever I want to. Who's your favorite, was or is your favorite guard in the NFL?
Favorite guard in the NFL? I went to Butte College in Chico, California. Okay. So big Larry Allen fan.
Wow. Yes. Interesting.
Yeah, and so he obviously a few years before me and then into his Cowboys career, but I remember going from Victoria, BC, where I born and raised. I started at a very small school in Montana for 1 year, Rocky Mountain College in Billings, Montana, transferred to Butte and Chico, and I was there for a year before going down for 2 years at New Mexico and playing offensive line there. Started at tackle in junior college there. And everywhere you went in the weight room and around the facility, there's a lot about Larry Allen. And then when you put on his tape, and I remember watching him do the combine testing and the 220, very, very impressive player, and someone fun to watch as you're striving to be.
I grew up in the days, this was dated with like Bob Kuchenberg and the undefeated Dolphins. Why do guards get such a bad rap? The pulling guards, the Larry Littles, those guys are dinosaurs. They were better athletes. I assume in the CFL, you got to pull even better, you got to pull even harder because the field is longer.
Field's wider, and then the yard off the ball, and it is longer and wider, and then the yard off the ball, it gives the defense a bit more room to navigate around. You're not into contact as quickly. So I did start my career out at tackle, and I think this was not by accident. As I got older and a bit slower, and I got moved to guard, and I ultimately finished my career for a year and a half at center.
Oh, center. So they move the quicker guys in. Is that the way that
works? Well, I don't know about that, but I can tell you this: the comfort level at guard and center of having teammates and offensive line partners on either side of you was very much a positive.
When you watch football, NFL or CFL wise, do you focus on the line or do you watch the rest of the game?
I think after spending so many years watching strictly the end zone copy and watching offensive line play, it's natural to look at that, but especially in this role now, what I'm finding myself is almost seeing that as a pre-snap and sort of look at formation, and then broadening my scope to see more now, and I'm finding, and even this year more, as we enjoy some games up north and down south, I'm starting to look across the field.
You can hit me now and stop the interview, but are you at your playing weight?
I'm about 30 pounds below, with about another probably 20 to go.
Do you realize that most guys go the other way?
Well, luckily I had a little bit of trouble keeping it on, so now this last, 30 down, 20 to go, that's 3 years working on that 20, so I still got some work cut out.
I will tell my buddy and golf partner Jonathan Ogden that we've put out the light. We finally got a guy that's gone the other way. Really, really great. Brian Ramsay, thank you very much. Rick Horrow, speak with you soon.
Thank you very much, Rick. Take care.
Awesome. So as we prepare for life after the draft and look at the collective bargaining agreement and see how players and owners respond, it's good to hear how others resolve the labor issues so we don't get backed up with a situation next year or the year after where we want to kill the golden goose that lays the $14 billion a year golden egg. Let's look at basketball. The NBA will allow teams to sell international sponsorship rights after team owners approved a 3-year test of the international team marketing program. Domestically, teams are limited to a 75-mile marketing territory. That policy remains in place. But the international program allows teams to include global advertising and marketing rights outside the U.S. and Canada, and the activation at all retail locations globally, and rights to post non-game content on sponsors' own digital and social media sites. Many existing team naming rights and jersey patch deals, by the way, are likely targets for the new program, and NBA President of Team Marketing and Business Ops, Amy Brooks, said the new plan is designed to take advantage of the global reach of team partners and to create more targeted non-game content. This move only makes more sense given the NBA's large international player makeup and the league's exploding popularity far outside its original footprint. How about the WNBA? They're looking at development of issues that might be problematic because the money's just not there, but yet they're still talking about a whole host of revenue that they've got to figure out how to do. Well, first of all, it's television. After this season, the broadcasters will feature 40 matches per season starting May 25 as Lynx hosts the Sky during the opening weekend of the new WNBA campaign. Which broadcaster? ESPN has been, but how about CBS? Sports Pro, the 11-time All-Star Sue Bird and defending WNBA champion Seattle Storm, will make 6 appearances on CBS Sports Network this season, including a finals rematch against the Washington Mystics on June 14. The 12-team WNBA constantly overshadowed by their male counterpart, but however, the new CBS broadcast may pave ways for the Women's League to find new economic avenues and exposure to different fans. And the bottom line is, if the WNBA wants to take their push one step further, the next investment would be to further explore an OTT platform, since the sports market is trending toward more a la carte basketball media interactivity. Well, speaking of the WNBA, and there might be an issue here with player safety, Breanna Stewart, obviously, out for the season and maybe longer, ruptures her Achilles while playing in Europe, and some are pointing to the almost year-round basketball schedule for women as the culprit. Stewart is far from the first WNBA player to be injured while playing overseas, and it's fair to wonder if this situation will make a difference going forward, as the WNBA and its players' union negotiates a new contract. WNBA players make the case that improvements in salary and other issues will result in an even better product, but the NBA countered that it loses money on the WNBA every year, about $12 million from last year. Ending WNBA players' financial need for nonstop play is a prime focus of Executive Director Terry Jackson, but observers in the medical field, such as Norfolk, Virginia-based Embody, which provides innovative solutions to restore peak performance to orthopedic patients and is seeking successful results with Achilles patients, note that money alone may not solve the problem. Creating a more holistic employment scenario that allows athletes real downtime during the year will go a long way toward injury prevention. And the NBA obviously needs to take this seriously, as the WNBA will. NBA, though, great on the field and off the field. Dallas Mavericks' Dirk Nowitzki sails off into the sunset with some basketball charity. After 21 seasons in the NBA, 2019 Heroes Celebrity Game will draw big names from the Dallas Cowboys, as well as the Rangers, as well as Mavs teammates and Hollywood celebrities, the Dirk Nowitzki Foundation and the Heroes Foundation. And he's saying goodbye to the NBA, but important sports philanthropists, and another example of how stars give back to the communities and fan bases they deal with. NBA Cares, another good example. 76ers Tobias Harris, Brooklyn Nets Jared Allen, Lakers LeBron James, Mavericks Pascal Siakam have gone above and beyond this year. Harris, for example, pushed for construction of a school in Haiti for further representation and fair treatment of women's sports and technology. Other examples, and the awards announced at the 2019 NBA Awards on June 24, with some of the most recognizable NBA stars in the game up for those awards. Good for the NBA and good for the WNBA as far as charity is concerned. How about golf? Well, by the way, we're coming up on National Golf Day, and the National Golf Foundation announced its study to look at the golf industry generally. Golf participation remains stable, with an estimated 24.2 million people playing on a course in 2018, a slight increase, and the almost as many people play off-course forms of the game, 23 million hitting golf balls with clubs at golf entertainment facilities like Topgolf and Drive Shack, indoor simulators and driving ranges, and with 9.3 million people exclusively playing golf off the course, the game's overall participant pool increased 4% to 33.5 million. Despite rainy weather's impact last year, 14.7 million people who didn't play golf last year but say they're very interested in playing golf on a course. Another great stat, the U.S. remains the best supplied golf market in the world, with over 14,000 facilities and nearly 17,000 courses, more than 75% of which are open to all players, the highest public-to-private ratio in history. And why? Well, Tiger, and more Tiger. He used a Bridgestone Tour B XS ball to win the Masters. Now the maker is congratulating Woods and fans by releasing a commemorative box of the product, only $44.99. It hit store shelves Friday after the Masters. Bridgestone started selling special boxes to stores, and within 24 hours they sold out. Shocker. In fact, Bridgestone said that every Tour B XS ball has been sold to retailers. ESPN.com noted Bridgestone doesn't yet know whether its exposure through Woods' victory at the Masters will translate to long-term sales, but it's anticipating increases based on the consumer interest displayed already. Bridgestone Golf President Dan Murphy said, "We're pretty excited to see the order back starting to increase. And I'd say the specific models that Woods plays, we're looking at a 20 to 30% bump in the sale of the products." After the Masters, Bridgestone saw a 209% increase in engagement on Twitter and a 400% increase in Facebook, a 205% increase in website traffic overall as compared to last year's Masters, and it continues to go up and up and up. Finally, let's point out we're only a couple weeks from the French Open, and let's talk tennis. But investment tennis, boardroom tennis. Serena Williams has become the latest athlete to announce her own VC firm. In an Instagram post, the 23-time Grand Slam winner revealed that Serena Ventures has quietly been investing in startups since 2014. The firm's website counts 30 startups in deals. Clearly, really, really important for her. And the portfolio, by the way, includes a number of companies like Gobble, home fitness system Tonal, women's razor brand Billy, cryptocurrency exchange Coinbase, female co-working startup The Wing, Propel, which offers financial software to low-income Americans. Overall capitalization, $12 billion. And according to Forbes, Williams is the highest paid female athlete in 2018, bringing in $18.1 million. Unmatched endorsement portfolio, Nike, Intel, JP Morgan, Lincoln, Gatorade, etc. This week, Serena involved in another massive undertaking. She and her sister Venus co-chair the prestigious Met Gala, which benefits the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Costume Institute in New York City. Obviously, a big winner on the court. The Williams sisters and Serena, a bigger winner off the court. Watch over time. We'd like to thank Brian Ramsay, the head of the CFLPA, to give us some perspective. We'd like to thank Dan Martin and others for putting this together. We'd also like to thank you for listening and joining us.